Good morning or noontime. It's been 8 sermons now that I've done online here, and it looks like it's going to be a few more that get done. I just pray and hope that everyone here is doing okay. I've talked to several of you, and I hope to continue to be calling people. It's been an encouragement to me and a blessing to me to talk to all of you. And with a lot of you now, it's just reflecting on the time that I've been with you, and I've been appreciative to the time I've spent with all of you. So going right into this, I have a joke to tell you as per tradition. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, I told you the joke about the boy asking his mom about the gray hair. Well, this is kind of part 2 to that. And it goes, attending a wedding for the first time, a little girl whispered to her mother and says, "Why is the bride dressed in white, Mom?" And the mom replies, "Because white is the color of happiness, and today is the happiest day of her life." And her mother tried to explain this in keeping it simple, also while keeping it quiet because the wedding was going on. And the child thought for a moment, and then she said, "So why is the groom wearing black?" So, I'm sure it's a happy day for him as well. I do have several announcements and a prayer request for myself, and I've been taking prayer requests as I've talked to all of you. And first thing though is offering. I've been talking to the churches about offering and getting your offering in. I know that we're all doing our best to make it, and it's certainly not a thing that is required, but if you're able to make your offering to the church, there is provisions made in every church to collect that and to deposit that. We have people that are dedicated to still doing that, and there are bills that need to be paid. We have been given a 6-month holiday by the district to not have to pay the apportionment, so that's been a blessing. But we still have other bills that need to be paid, electric and water and all of that. So offering is still a necessity. And also too, there is the talk now of reopening, and looking at the schedule and the way things are, it looks like we won't be opening now until mid-May. And for us, in the 3 churches, it doesn't look like May is going to be a time that we will open at all unless things get a lot better. I'm thinking at the end of May or even June that we will be able to open up, because one of the provisions that was made that even after the opening was that people 65 and older should still stay protected, because the risk of reinfection and a flare-up, a second flare-up, is still would be great. So if that's true, then that's well more than 50% of all my churches put together. And while we could talk about how we will change things in the next few weeks as far as service is concerned, we certainly aren't going to be able to do much as far as being in the building for a Sunday morning service. So please keep that in your plans. Also know that soon that I will be moving, and would appreciate your prayers on that matter. Also, another prayer request that I have that I would ask you is that I have a friend who's has COVID right now, and I ask that you pray for her as well. And in thinking about the last few weeks, I have realized that one thing that I know you all like and that I haven't done is do the Lord's Prayer. So if you would bow your heads right now, and we will do the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Today I'm not going to read the scripture beforehand. There's three stories I'm going to bring to you. The first one is, and if you want to write this down, you're more than welcome to. The first one is in John 4:16 through 26. That's John 4:16 through 26. I'm reading out of the New International Version. The next one will be John 8:1 through 11. That's John 8:1 through 11. And then the third one will be John 11:38 through 44. That's John 11:38 through 44. And if you notice, it isn't going to be the complete story, but it will include everything that I will be reading to you today. And if you remember last week, I started a series about the road to the hill, and it's an Easter-related sermon, but we're still in the Sundays after Easter. This is still a very appropriate time of talking about Easter. And this is part 2, and it's the road to the hill. And this one is entitled 3 Along the Road. And last week we looked at Easter and how its origins way back in Genesis, and how Adam and Eve had, because of their choice to not follow Jesus' commands, it caused the original sin, and how that separated man from God, and how there was this need for sacrifice after that. And we needed an atonement. Today we're moving up the time scale to when Jesus was actually here walking on the earth, and there is the verses that are read that I have told you about are all from different encounters of when Jesus was on his travels to the cross. We know his whole life was led to the cross, and though some of these won't be in his final week, they certainly are part of that journey to the cross. And he ran into some interesting characters along the way, and had some, and I don't think you could say any of them really had the similar stories as the other ones. The first scene I have, and if you want to turn to that, it's in John 4, and I'll be reading from 16 through 18. And he told her, "Go call your husband and come back." And she replied, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you have 5 husbands, and the one that you have now is not your husband." And if you remember that story, that's part of the story of the woman at the well. And Jesus had gone to the well to get water, and he was thirsty, and this Samaritan woman was there, and she offered to help him, and she approached him in a way that Jesus felt open to talk to her about the way of salvation, and said that he was the water that brings life everlasting, and if she would drink of that she would not thirst again. And that opened up Jesus to say that, asking her that question that he had asked her. He says, go call your husband to come back, because he wanted to share more, and he knew what her life was about, and he asked that she bring her husband, knowing all full well that she did not have a husband. In fact, she had several husbands, and the man that she was with was not her husband. Jesus revealed this as a failure, but he did not do any of this in a sense of condemnation, except to tell her that she had sinned, and that the choice of staying with someone who was not her husband and sleeping with him was a sin. And so now I'd like to look at his reply to what he had told her in that whole thing. And this will be John 4:25 through 26. The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I am the one speaking to you. I am he." the woman mentions that he is the Messiah, and that shows that she had some faith and some understanding of who the Messiah was, and that she was very open to what he had to say. And we know that this story had a positive outcome, and he was very willing to admit that he was the Messiah. To her, a Samaritan, when he wouldn't tell most people at that time that he was the Messiah, yet her, he told that. And that brings us great hope that he had for her, that it showed that hope that he had. And I think part of it too, that he was just impressed with the Samaritan people, because she said to her in this encounter, he said, "You worship what you do not know, but yet the Jewish people worship what they do know." And we know the trouble that the Jewish people had knowing who Jesus was supposed to be. Yet she had such a faith that she even said that you will come and explain everything to us. She may have not recognized who he was, but she knew what his job was about. So we know that he had great love for her, and that he knew that her restoration was something that was assured. He knew that divorce and the immorality in her life was something that she needed to straighten, and Jesus set to straighten that out with her. But the lesson we get out of this, number one for today, is that Jesus frees us from our past, and that's certainly what he did for her. He helped expose that so that he could talk about it, and he brought that to a point where he could help her get past that, and help her talk about where her salvation truly does lie. And Jesus does free us from our past, and that is an important thing to realize. And I hope that that's something that you realize for yourself. The second scene comes from John 8, 1 through 5, and it reads like this. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and at dawn he appeared again at the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery, and they made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses commands us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say?" And you know this story. It's a famous one. But the religious people of the town knew this woman and knew that her acts were sinful, and yet they, without shame and without any caution for her at all, exposed her for all the world to see, and let her be ashamed for what she had done, not knowing really what their motivation was for her. They certainly were trying to trap Jesus into saying something that they could get back at him with. But the thing is that her shame had to have been palatable. To see what was on her face, to see what was going on, and to know that her act had been so brutally exposed like that was an awful thing for sure. And for her, the present situation was not very promising. Most of the time, people like that would end up being stoned. But look at now John 8 through 10 through 11. And Jesus straightens up and asks her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she replied. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." So we know we've missed a little bit in the middle there, but the point is that Jesus once again, with the person that had their sin exposed in such a brutal way, he had chased away the crowd, changed her current situation from one of a dire need to one of forgiveness, really. And her day of judgment was totally changed in that instant. and Jesus forgave her. So that also gives us a lesson for today. For number 2 is that Jesus gives us hope in the present. Not only in the past does he forgive us of our sins in our past, but he gives us the sins that we do today. What are you struggling with right now? If it's the issues of fear and anger and worry and all of that, Jesus understands all of that. And if you're doing things that even now that are sinful to God's eyes, he can forgive you of those things now. Whatever is going on right now, you need to focus on God and ask for that forgiveness, and it will come just that easily. Jesus offers us hope where you're at your spot, no matter what it is. If he can forgive a woman who is caught in adultery, then he can forgive us of what we have done. The third and final scene is from John 11, 38 through 40. And Jesus, once more deeply moved, came into the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, and he's been in there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And that's from John 11, 38 through 40. And we know this story, we know it well. It's the story of Lazarus. And at the time Jesus was speaking here, it says that he has been in there for 4 days. His future has been assured. He is not going to be on this earth anymore. For most people in that situation, he's done. He has got just heaven or hell to look forward to. But we know with the power of Jesus that even the grave cannot keep us from that future. That he can pull us out of that grave if he wanted to, and he did that with Lazarus. And we know Lazarus was a friend of Jesus, and he's probably going to heaven. But either way, we know that the course was changed for Lazarus. He had a future of being not on earth anymore, and Jesus pulled him from the grave and gave him a future back with his sisters and being with the people that he loved. So now look at John 11, 43 through 44, and I've kind of talked ahead of myself here, but when he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, and his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth was around his face. Then Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave cloths and let him go." Jesus showed the glory of God at that moment. He called Lazarus by name, and Lazarus walked out. And as I've said, his future was changed forever. Which leads me to lesson number 3, that Jesus not only cares about our past and our present, but he cares deeply about our future. And part of him coming to earth was all about all of our future, of where we're going and where were possibilities that we can go. Before that, the chances of death were much greater, and now we're even free of that. That the true death of the body, the death of the body will not lead to the death of the soul. And the true death of the soul will lead us, if we believe in Jesus, into greater glory. So, where we are right now, you could even be at a point where nobody has any hope of your future. People could say that you stinketh, that you're not worthy of anything, that you're not amounting to anything, that you're not going to do anything that's going to be of any value. So what? But Jesus cares deeply about that future, and he cares deeply about what you will become and what you can do, and he has great plans for you. And if you say, well, my future, I'm not dying on, and I'm not dead and that, and how does that change for me? And I only pull you back to the previous two stories and say those people that he had talked to, the woman, the Samaritan at the well, and the woman caught in adultery, their futures were changed just as much as Lazarus was. These people that Jesus ran into on the road onto the hill, all three of them were never the same again. Their pasts had been forgiven, their present had changed considerably, and their future was so much more brighter than it could have been without Jesus had he had not interacted with him. Those people are the people that he went to the hill for. Jesus is still looking for people like that today. People who need to be free from their past, people who need to have their past changed and their present changed and their future changed. And those people are us. Jesus went on the hill for us as well. That we have those things that we have. There's things that are in our past that we need forgiveness for. And there's things that we do even today that we regret deeply. But God has a plan to change our future. And all you need to do is to need him and to believe in him and trust in him. So these lessons are for you today. If you have a hymnal at home, and I know some of you do, the song is 397. It's I Need Thee Every Hour. And we're going to sing verses 1, 2, 3, and 5. That song was particularly fitting with the sermon that I had this morning, and that we do need him every hour, and we need him in our past, but the past is something that we can no longer reach into, and what is done, but God and Jesus can reach into that past and change the conditions of those past from a thing of sin to something that is forgiven. He cannot change the things that we have to deal with that past, but he can change the fact that we are forgiven of that past. And we can change us who we are now if we believe who he is. And we can change where we are going in the future with that forgiveness and that salvation. So let's bow our heads in prayer. Dear Lord, I ask that all of these people, no matter where they are, that they realize that it's the sin that God does not like. It's the sin that is what separates us from who our salvation is and who can bring us. But Jesus reached out not to our sin, but to us. He accepted us in spite of our sin, for we were made whole because of that. And if we choose him, then we are made whole. I'm just so thankful that you've forgiven me and that you've taken me away from my sin. And we need to use that as an example when looking at others, that we separate the person's sin from who they are, and that we accept them for who they are. I thank you, dear Lord, for this example. I thank you for this story. And I thank you for this time that I have with these people. And I pray that you bless that time and that you bless these people and in all that they do, and that you keep them safe until we return again in another week. I thank you, dear Lord, for all of these things. Amen.